At first glance, Mary Tudor and Elizabeth Tudor seem like opposites. One was shaped by Spanish Catholicism and ruled briefly in controversy. The other emerged from a Protestant court and reigned long enough to become a legend. Yet the closer you look, the more their lives echo each other. As half-sisters and daughters of Henry VIII, both were defined by questions of blood, legitimacy, and survival. Each inherited a kingdom uneasy with female authority, turning their reigns into a test of whether a woman could rule at all. That answer, uneven, costly, and transformative, was first forced into reality by Mary, then refined and reshaped by Elizabeth. A kingdom that didn't trust women. 16th century England was deeply patriarchal, not just socially, but ideologically. Many believed women were governed by emotion rather than reason, too weak to lead armies, manage councils, or enforce law with the cold discipline expected of kings. The idea of a reigning queen wasn't simply unusual, it was unsettling. That tension sits behind everything that happened to Mary and Elizabeth. Their policies mattered, of course. But so did their bodies, their marriages, their fertility, and even their image. A male monarch could be judged on wars, taxes, and treaties. A queen was judged on those, and on whether she could produce an heir and whether her husband might take over the state. That's why Mary's choice of spouse created panic. And it's why Elizabeth's decision not to marry became one of the most calculated political strategies in English history. A princess raised to believe. Mary was born at Greenwich on 18 February 1516, the only surviving child of Henry VIII and his first wife, Catherine of Aragon. Catherine's background mattered enormously. She was Spanish, closely tied to the Catholic world, and raised in a tradition where royal women could be formidable. Catherine's mother, Isabella of Castile, was remembered as a warrior queen, an example of female authority that didn't apologize for itself. Mary's early years contained a simple promise. She was loved, she was legitimate, and she mattered. Henry doted on her as a child, and she received the best education available for a royal girl. She was trained to shine in courtly skills, languages, music, dance, and etiquette, because a princess in Europe was more than a daughter. She was diplomacy in human form. In royal politics, a daughter could be a treaty, a truce, or a strategic threat. Mary was engaged more than once in early childhood, not because anyone expected a toddler to marry, but because betrothal itself was a political signal. Her value wasn't sentimental, it was geopolitical. Yet behind all those plans was Henry's obsession, a son. Henry VIII's hunger for a male heir. Henry VIII's dynasty was not old, and he knew it. Without a stable male succession, England risked conflict. Civil war was not a distant memory, it was a realistic fear. Over time, Henry's desire for a son hardened into fixation. When Catherine's childbearing years began to fade, the king's priorities changed with brutal clarity. He became convinced his marriage was cursed and argued that his union with Catherine was unlawful because she had once been married to his brother. He pressed for an annulment. Catherine refused to cooperate. The Pope refused to make it easy. The dispute dragged on year after year, and Mary, still young, was trapped in the middle. Then, Henry turned his desire for a son into a revolution. He broke with Rome, declared himself supreme head of the church in England, and used a new religious structure to get what he wanted. The cost was catastrophic for Mary. Mary's humiliation and the birth of Elizabeth. In 1531, Henry barred Mary from seeing her mother unless both supported his annulment. They refused, and Mary's world collapsed. Her legitimacy was questioned, her mother isolated, and her Catholic identity treated as a problem to erase. Henry married Anne Boleyn in 1533, and that September she gave birth to Elizabeth. For Henry, it proved Anne's fertility. For Mary, it meant displacement. She was stripped of rank, pressured to accept illegitimacy, and placed in Elizabeth's household as a reminder of her fall. When Catherine of Aragon died in 1536, Mary was even denied attendance at her funeral. Her resistance was not stubbornness, it was survival. Collapse, fear, and a brother who changed everything. After Anne Boleyn's execution in 1536 and Henry's marriage to Jane Seymour, Mary finally submitted to her father, accepting his religious authority and the claim that she was illegitimate. She returned to court, but her position remained fragile. The birth of Edward in 1537 changed everything. It eased pressure on Mary and Elizabeth as heirs, but tied their futures to the life of a single boy. When Henry VIII died in 1547, Edward ruled as a Protestant child king under powerful regents. Mary resisted religious change, Elizabeth learned caution. Under Edward, the sisters became not just relatives, but rival futures for England. A succession crisis and Mary's most important moment. When Edward VI died in July 1553, his ministers tried to block Mary by placing Lady Jane Grey on the throne. They underestimated her. Mary rallied support in East Anglia, claimed her right, and the country backed her. Jane's rule collapsed, and Mary entered London as queen without a major battle. Her victory mattered far beyond succession. It proved that a woman could rule by right, not by marriage. As England's first crowned queen regnant, Mary set the precedent that Elizabeth would later build upon. Restoration, marriage, and fear. Mary ruled with a single purpose, restoring Catholicism, which she saw as a sacred duty, not a political choice. To secure that future, she needed an heir. Her marriage to Philip of Spain, however, alarmed England. Though treaties limited his power, many feared the country would fall under foreign Catholic control. Those fears sparked rebellion. The Wyatt Uprising sought to stop the marriage and, for some, replace Mary with Elizabeth. Suspicion alone sent Elizabeth to the Tower, where her life hung in the balance. Mary came close to ordering her execution, but held back by conscience or calculation. That restraint changed everything. Had Elizabeth died, England's future would have taken a very different path. Bloody Mary and the problem of reputation. Mary's enforcement of heresy laws led to the execution of about 287 Protestants, earning her lasting infamy. While religious killings were common in the era, the burnings became uniquely tied to her name, amplified by later Protestant storytelling. Mary believed repression would save souls and restore unity. Many of her subjects saw only fear. Over time, propaganda sealed her image. Elizabeth, far more skilled at self-presentation, benefited from that contrast, leaving Mary's complex reign reduced to a single word: bloody. The phantom pregnancy and the crumbling of Mary's future. Mary's deepest hope was a child. In late 1554, she appeared pregnant. Europe watched. England held its breath. Elizabeth was summoned to court to witness what would have been the birth of an heir, an event that would push Elizabeth down the line of succession and lock the country into a Catholic future. No baby came. The pregnancy was false, possibly a phantom pregnancy, possibly linked to illness. The emotional impact was devastating. Mary faced public humiliation, political weakening, and private heartbreak. Philip left England for long stretches. Mary's health declined, and court loyalties began to shift toward Elizabeth, the rising sun. Mary died on 17 November 1558, aged 42. And then, with striking calm, England transitioned to Elizabeth. Elizabeth's reign. Elizabeth ruled for 45 years and did more than undo Mary's work. She learned from it. She avoided the dangers of marriage, turning her unmarried status into a political tool. Courtship became diplomacy, delay became leverage, and uncertainty became control. Her choice not to marry was strategy, not sentiment. She also benefited from foundations Mary had already laid. Mary's reign proved that a queen could wield full royal authority, making Elizabeth's rule easier to accept. By shaping her image as Gloriana, the Virgin Queen, Elizabeth ruled in contrast to her sister's failures, and with that knowledge, she mastered power. What really united them? Despite their differences, Mary and Elizabeth shared the same core wounds. Both were once cherished heirs, later rejected by their father, and forced to survive dangerous court politics during a sibling's reign. Together, they proved that female rule was not an anomaly. Mary broke the barrier, making England accept a crowned queen in practice. Elizabeth refined it, turning that breakthrough into stability and myth. History often paints them as opposites, but Elizabeth's success rested on foundations Mary helped build through resolve, missteps, and sacrifice. Buried together in Westminster Abbey, the two sisters ultimately reshaped the monarchy forever. Mary and Elizabeth weren't just rivals, they were the proof that power doesn't always look the same, but it can be just as strong. Their choices, failures, and survival reshaped England in ways we still feel today. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Tudor history and want more stories like this, like and subscribe.